Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show for the next episode in the TGT podcast. It's a bumper show tonight, as you can see on your screen, because I'm joined by four fantastic people to discuss. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Arsenal win a game and all of a sudden everyone in the world wants to come on the show because they're no longer as depressed as they were previously, quite unsurprisingly. But it is nice to be having a podcast not only after a 3-month break, but after actually winning a game. We've not had this feeling in quite a long time. So let's run through the order. It's the man from Miami. How are we doing, John boy?
Oh, awesome. I'm not sure I would characterize myself as not depressed still, even though we won, but we can get into that, I guess.
I'm trying the positivity.
Maybe less depressed. Less depressed is probably a better way to put it.
Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on again.
No problem, mate. No problem at all. Next, we got French. How are you doing, fella?
Yeah, I'm good. I just want to go on record saying that I said I was going to come on if we lost and vent. So I'm actually disappointed I don't get a chance to release all of that.
You did.
You know, sure.
You did say that. You did say that, 100%. Good stuff. Tomo, how you doing, fella?
Yeah, good, mate. All well. It's definitely good to come on after a result. We are definitely down in the doldrums after the last couple of weeks. So, yeah, good to see everyone, and hopefully we can be a bit positive this week.
Yes, 100%. And finally, it's been a little bit of a while since Mike has been on the show. Mike is a fantastic writer. You should go check out his stuff. I'm going to leave a link to his latest article in the description for this. Mike, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, very well. Blessed to be on. Thank you, Tom.
No problem at all. So, and obviously, welcome to everyone in our live chat that's taking the time out of their Saturday, Friday. Oh, my God, I'm losing track of days at this rate. It's so long I've been in lockdown. We're losing track of what day is which. But happy Friday, and I hope you've had a good week and looking forward to a decent weekend, which I hope we can start off you quite nicely. We're going to go back in reverse order before we get into the flow of things. Mike, I'm going to come to you, mate. So we've won a game against Brighton. It's been so long since we've had that feeling. How were you after that game?
Well, I was just utterly relieved because 3 losses and we could have gone to serious meltdown and people wanting the coach out, which I think is just hugely premature. And I think that the team deserved the victory. I thought it was a very well set up game. I'm sure we're going to come to the details of it, but I was thrilled. Pep in my step now, Tom. Yeah.
I've just realised that, thanks to French, I've been sitting there going, we won against Brighton. Well, actually, we won against Southampton. So thank you, French, for pointing that out. And I'm sure there was people in the chat box going, what on earth is he talking about? We wish we won against Brighton.
Rage. You just brought it all back.
I was trying to repress it a little bit, but here it is. It's like the floodgates are open again. Here we go.
They're both on the south coast. It doesn't matter. But yeah, no, it's the same. I mean, if there's any Brighton and Southampton fans watching, they're fuming. But yeah, no, apologies for that. Clearly, this lockdown is causing me to have a bit of cabin fever right now. Tomo, I mean, it was an interesting game because it was one of those in which I felt when we were 1-0 up, we were begging for an equaliser to come at any minute. I mean, were you on the edge of your seat thinking, my God, it's going to happen again?
I've got to say, it's probably one of the first times I've never celebrated a goal, because I was just, after what happened the week before with Pepe scoring an absolute blinder, I was actually on the phone with my brother just, waxing lyrical about Pepe. And then, by the time I checked back at the screen, we'd conceded. I mean, so I definitely held my breath, and I'm glad we got there in the end.
Yeah, 100%. It's a moment of relief, it's fair to say. French, whilst you're not correcting me, how are you feeling after the game?
Yeah, there's like a weird kind of relentless optimism that kind of comes out of nowhere. I was ready for it to be obviously a kind of ranting session, not rant, but venting, and it's come out like completely the other way. Now all of a sudden I'm looking at Europa League as something to be proud of accomplishing by the end of the season. I'm like, okay, we can do this, boys. Like, we might be able to do that. Like, so yeah, it is what it is. I mean, a win kind of rallies the troops, and you got to look at the bright side.
100%. And John, I mean, one of these games, we feel like it's so funny how emotions change, isn't it? Like after the Brighton game, season's done, it's over, and now we've got French sitting here going, Europa League, we're going to qualify. So where's your head at regarding this?
So I'm very, very reserved when it comes to the expectations I have around the side. I am very well aware that we're in a rebuild right now, and I'm also aware that it's not exactly clear whether that's going to actually pan out successfully or not. So I am very reserved with my optimism. It's always nice to win. I feel like I'm taking it with a grain of salt, though, or I guess a grain of sugar, because it's a little bit of an optimistic point of view. Yeah. But so I'm not popping the champagne yet that we beat Southampton. Like it's hard to get super excited about it. I'm happy we won. I thought that there was a lot of positives to take away from that. It's a little bit difficult to be as happy, and I know that that's a little bit of a downer position to take. But look, we won a game. Absolutely, like the FA Cup is something that's a possibility now. Possibly Europa League, even though we could talk about whether that's even a beneficial thing for us to be in next season during a rebuild, and that's where we are right there. So I'm happy we won. I'm happy that people can be celebrating a victory rather than the crap that we've seen recently, but I'm also reserved as to how optimistic I am about where we are as a club and kind of where we are in the season.
For sure. Let's jump into the live chat before we go round with some questions on specific players. So we've come in. There's a lot of people taking the mick out of me at the moment. It's fair to say. Mike Kurtz is saying Tom's playing FIFA again whilst listening to the podcast. I told you I've never done that, and I refute that claim completely from Mike from the Gooners pod, 100%. Omar says, glad we won, but I don't really care, to be honest. Our season is over. I mean, that is such an epitome of so many fans right now. Tunde says, I think our midfield is a bigger worry than the defence, and that's why the defence is always under pressure. We need ballers in midfield, progressive dribblers and passers, no nonsense guys. So speaking of that defence, Mike, I'm going to come to you, mate, on the man of the match for me, who was Rob Holding. Rob Holding has been so indifferent since he returned from injury. He's been criticised heavily for being quite slow, not very reactive, but he dealt with everything in that game. How did you sum up the Englishman's performance?
I was very impressed, and if I was Rob Holding, probably in fact the entire back four, I would look at this as an opportunity because Arsenal, like John said, are going through a rebuild, and I think it's going to be our midfield first, but it could well be our back four, and those guys have got a chance. Mustafi is the classic example. He was in a far worse shape than Holding's ever thought of being in, and he's got redemption, and now it looks like it might be happening for Holding. I'll say also, Tom, that I was particularly impressed with Holding because what made me nervous is when we went to a back 3/5. A lot of the times that not just Arsenal but any team struggles with is taking responsibility because you have so many numbers back there that often they pass responsibility off to one another. But to me, Holding of the three centre backs, Holding was actually taking the initiative and not passing the buck. The only time that they did was when that ball went over all of them to the back post and they were too compact. And they'd all left it to each other, and I think it was Bertrand at the back post had the best shot of the game for Southampton. But Holding is, I hope that Holding has taken that opportunity, and I hope Holding sticks around. I think all Arsenal fans like Rob Holding. Tom, to be fair.
Yeah, I like him a lot. Go on, French.
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump in and ask a question that kind of frames the way we look at the game in a way because someone touched on it in the comments there, Omar. The game itself, at the start of it, for me, it was definitely a nothing game, right? But when you win it, you kind of look at it in a slightly different way, depending on how you frame the season overall. So the season's done in terms of kind of most likely getting any kind of European places, most likely. Top 6 is still maybe achievable, which would be a good achievement in terms of numbers. But then you have the question of whether it's good or not. But even on a momentum level, you think stringing some wins together is good for the morale of the team for next season to try and build what Arteta is trying to do. So I don't know. For me, I wonder what you guys think in terms of the objective for the season, because Arteta has to say something, right? And the players have to think something. In terms of what you think the objective of the season would be, realistically, what do you guys think it is? And that kind of frames the game itself in a way.
Tom, I'll throw that to you, fella.
Yeah, for me, I think this season's a write-off personally. I don't want to judge Arteta on anything this season. I think he's a good coach. I think he's definitely got something about him. I think, in the football circles, he's well regarded. So he's definitely got something. So, given all the turmoil and, the ups and downs of the season, I think to try and take anything or reading to anything, given he's had, half a season or maybe slightly less than, is something I probably won't do.
Let me word it slightly differently.
And
so I was going to say, let me word it slightly differently then. What do you think he was going to say to his players? Because he has to say something in terms of what they can realistically achieve. Like, I'm just curious as to because they're rallying behind something. So what is he? What is it? Just playing for the pride of the badge, or do you think he's still saying? Yeah, go on.
Not maybe. I think probably at this stage, man. To be honest, he's just going to talk to them, like man to man. But look, if you want to leave, then you still need to play well, and he's going to give everybody minutes. So the better they perform towards the end of the season, the better contract they're going to get, either at Arsenal or another club. So I think he's just going to have to, be frank with a lot of the guys. And I've got a feeling that maybe that's some of the discussions, maybe he's had with, potentially a Guendouzi, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. Maybe, there's the Lacazette situation. Ozil, I'm not going to talk about that. But, at the end of the day, as men, as professional athletes, you would hope that these guys want to, to show themselves as professionals, to kind of leave a good impression. Because, at the end of the day, it's the Premier League. Fair enough, we're not in the Champions League, but we've got, hundreds of millions of people watching the league week in, week out. How do you want people to know you? So I think, man management, individual one-on-ones, is the way. So none of these guys can hide anymore because, it's all changing next season. So it's basically how they want to be remembered, what type of athlete, professional they want to be, and put the onus more on the players. If they want to play, then, they'll play for the club or they'll get a good contract at another club. If they don't want to play, then, so be it. They don't get minutes and he gives it to somebody else. So hopefully it's just Arteta trying to, use this period to get to know his players better, and let's see who responds. But in terms of positioning or going for, Europa, I just think we've got to go game by game, and just try and motivate the players to just play to the best of their ability. And then end of the season, I guess we see where we're at.
Okay. I want to, just jump in. Is that okay, Tom?
Of course.
Just got a thought there. I was of the mindset, maybe some of these other guys, that maybe this is a write-off and maybe next season it's better off that we are where Chelsea were a few years ago, where they didn't have any European competition. And I see the benefit of it. And I think that that's an ideal scenario. However, I think that there's a real problem with that. I think if you balance that thought and the desire to have no European football for 1 year so we can focus on the Premier League, which sounds perfect, with the fact that the biggest problem in our team, in my opinion, is we're completely imbalanced team, don't have a modern midfield, got real problems with athleticism and be able to even compete with teams. So in order for that to change, I think that's the number one biggest problem at Arsenal Football Club, is you have to get better players, or more modern players. Maybe not better, or good players, but they're imbalanced and they're not modern. So I think you have to qualify for some European competition in order to have the money to go buy the better players that we need, which I think is a priority over choosing to opt out of the European competition.
If I could jump in really quick to that one, actually, because I think that you bring up a good point, and just to kind of play devil's advocate on that a little bit. I think that there's a good argument to be made that those kind of big players that would be attracted to the huge European competition and I know some people might not agree with this, which is why it's a devil's advocate position. Those kind of players aren't really the ones we should be looking at in our position right now. It should be those kind of maybe the lower league, maybe not as well-known players that kind of slipped under the radar a little bit, that we can kind of use to rebuild. And I think that that's where the real talent's going to be, because especially at the Premier League, we mentioned on the last podcast, the prices are so inflated that it's almost doesn't make any sense from a financial perspective, especially a team during a rebuild, to just start throwing money at players like that. So if you look at like the way Liverpool was doing it, they had to sell a lot of their big players, but they really dipped into kind of lower tier teams and teams that you look at what Leicester did. Obviously, that's not a perfect model, but the reality is that if we're looking at certain kinds of quality players from positions that aren't going to break the bank for us. I think that's what we need to be doing from a financial perspective. And I think that that's probably where they're going to be looking. So in that sense, that I guess would be the devil's advocate position there, because we would be able to focus on getting those kind of players, and we wouldn't have to worry about spreading ourselves too thin over European competition. But I can see it both ways.
I was going to jump on. I totally agree on your point, because also, if we look at history, we've been in the European competitions, and I feel like, sometimes, you just got to stop the bleeding. And I think, we still have delusions of grandeur. I keep saying this, we think we're a Champions League club. We're just 1 or 2 players away. And this is why we keep buying the same type of players. Just if we're able to rebalance the squad, there is value in the squad. Obviously, there's reports about Guendouzi. Lucas Torreira is another player who's worth probably a bit of money. He's well respected in Italy. If he doesn't quite fit into Arteta's system, 25 million, 30 million euros could buy you a decent player from, the German, Austrian league, maybe the French league, or, Ligue 2 in France. So, we can rebalance with getting rid of some key players in our squad. Clearly, we've got guys like Lacazette, we know, who may not have a future at the club with 2 years to go on his contract. Can we get younger, more hungry players on a smaller budget? And then if we have that core nucleus, at least it's something to build from. So, just appreciating or realizing that we actually don't have a Champions League squad, and just starting again. Maybe we can do a Leicester, maybe we can do an Ajax, and just, have a completely different approach, just start again and then see where we go.
Yeah, I was going to make a point there. I like what Tom said, and I agree with most of it. To me, here's an actual example, and I don't know that this is fact, but example, I believe that without any European football, I think we'll get a player maybe like Thomas Partey. Okay, so if we get Thomas Partey, regardless, that's great. But what if we had European football and could get Thomas Partey and Upamecano? Because now we have an extra, let's say, 40 million to play with, rather than get another centre-back that maybe isn't up to task like the other 10 that we purchased in the last 5 years. And so, I fear that the budget will just shrink and we'll just go by average again if we're not in Europe. I would love to not be in Europe, but I just fear. I
think that when you fearing not being in Europe, especially, and you brought up the point earlier on about Chelsea, and one of our members, Mike Hernandez, actually said during that season, Chelsea were backed by a billionaire in a time where FFP wasn't really coming into play. And I think there's two sides to it. I think the side that you raise is completely legit about being out of Europe. It focuses on the league. You have to worry too much about massive injuries because of the amount of games that you're going to be playing, and fitness is going to be higher, so you can perform better in the league. But I also think that there is an element of transfer. The word's not biased, but in a way that some players will want to play in those top competitions, and the players that you own as well and are employed at the club will want to play in those top competitions. I did see a comment that disagreed with that in the chat, and it was actually Mike Hernandez replying to himself by saying, I want to play in the Champions League is a myth in his opinion, and actually not many players are focused on that anymore. And maybe I think that's the case for some players that are more financially driven, but I still do think that ambition is there, especially for a player like Aubameyang, who's coming towards the twilight years of his career. He's going to want to finish on a high. He's going to want to finish by winning something, and that's what we'll struggle to offer him at the moment by being out of the European competition. Carrying on then with some of the comments in the live chat, Brian Robles in the chat, or Brian Robles, however you want to pronounce it. I remember there was the Everton keeper, Robles, that everyone pronounced it like that. So apologies, Brian, if I've pronounced that incorrectly. I recommend everyone read Drew's article he shared on Twitter today. It's the exact approach that Arsenal should take, and I'm going to leave a link to that in the description after this is finished going out live. So if you're watching on playback, you'll be able to read that along with Mike's latest article as well. Omar says that we need out of Europe, in my opinion. at the moment, because just focus on the Premier League is the biggest thing for us. Adam Stroud says that I think the Championship is the place to look. Good mentality and considerably cheaper than the bigger European leagues. And I think we've actually seen a lot of players come up from the Championship, even in January. You look at how Bowen's done for West Ham. He's arguably one of their really good players towards the second half of the season since he joined. So I think that there is a market there for us to sort of utilise. So I think that is definitely something that Arsenal should pick up on. John, do you want to come in, mate?
Yeah, just one quick point before I guess we move on. And I think that Mike's follow-up was very well taken, and your point afterwards, Tom. One thing that we didn't touch on that I just kind of want to make sure we could check that box is, and I don't hear it talked about as much, is the players that want to come play in the Premier League, which is also very enticing for footballers, especially across Europe. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of publicity in the Premier League. It's a good platform for them, whether they want to stay here and do something. And almost there's a good amount of teams that can actually legitimately challenge for the title. And it's a very, I would imagine, as a competitive player, exciting league to be playing in. So that being said, I think that's something to take into consideration as well when you're looking at it's not just Europe that pulls players. The Premier League itself pulls players.
Can I jump in there, Tom, and just quickly add to that?
Mate.
Because I like John's point. I think he's got a really good point that we can't ever forget. And, to add to John's point, I would say that Arsenal is one of the better, if not the best, big club, if we can still call ourselves that, to come and join, because there are opportunities to play, and not just play. You could be a solid first choice player at Arsenal. You go join Liverpool, Chelsea, even Leicester, these other clubs, then you're competing against a player who's perhaps your equal. And I can pick maybe right back, centre back, defensive midfield, central midfield, those four positions. If you were a pretty good player, you're probably starting for Arsenal. So John's point's a good one, that you go get a player who wants to play in the Premier League. They may actually start for Arsenal rather than just be a squad player right now anyway.
For sure. Let's have a look at one of the players that's actually being linked away from the Premier League. Well, actually not completely away from the Premier League, because he actually popped up, as we discussed earlier in our WhatsApp group, on Leicester's website, which is quite amusing. Apparently that is just a completely random thing which you can just do on some websites these days, and by putting in a certain player's name, it will pop up as if they own them. And that's obviously Matteo Guendouzi, who I have to say is very brave, because he's popped up in our chat today. He's sitting there, Matteo Guendouzi. He says, I only say if Monsieur Arteta tells me his hair secret. So nice of Guendouzi to come into our chat. However, boys, I have to say, please do not let his presence impact on what you would like to say on him. Mike, I'm going to come to you first on this. He's being linked with a move away. £40 million is the figure being touted around. However much you believe in that, though, is completely conjecture. Arteta actually came out today and said some more interesting things on the topic, annoyingly, after I did a whole show on it. He decided to go out. I know that Arteta's life doesn't revolve around me, and it's annoying, but his comments were rather confusing because he didn't shut it down. And he didn't confirm it, but by not shutting it down, it seems to infer there is quite a bit of truth in this deal. What are your thoughts on the whole Guendouzi situation, Mike?
Well, I think that if his attitude is what it's speculated to be, then I don't think that it's even a debate. I think that Mikel Arteta is going to do the ruthless thing, as he talked about his first ever press conference, and I think that Matteo Guendouzi will be gone. I'll tell you what, I think also, I think in a perfect world, because he's 21 maybe, right? I think you'd loan him out just to see if he can be the midfielder that we hoped a year ago. But the biggest piece of it for me is no doubt Arsenal desperately need an athletic, modern midfield. I know I'm feeling like a scratch record here, and he is not that. So he might be a fantastic footballer. He might be your favourite player, but I don't think he's what Arsenal need. Arsenal need players with agility and quickness and strength and power. And so for 40 million, even 30 million, with not a lot of money, I don't think Arsenal are really left with much choice, Tom.
French, I want to come to you on this because I know that you're sort of a different mind. You were discussing in our WhatsApp group earlier today that you wouldn't like to see him sold. What's your thoughts on it?
So put the whole thing into context, right? He arrived from League Two as a nobody, and fitted right into the first team, I think, against Man City on his debut, and was an impressive player straight away. And a team that kind of ended up disorganized and messy, he shone, he looked very good. He had very good parts and then very average parts as a player coming from second division France would. But overall, I think he exceeded expectations when he landed. And then in this, interim manager and then a new manager later, I think what we're seeing with the attitude is something that's trickled down from Arsenal players and from what we've had for a long time in the dressing room, which is an attitude that we don't have to try as hard against certain teams and that we're better than them because we earn more money than them. And that's something that our players have been accused of even under Wenger. So my point with the Guendouzi thing isn't that we shouldn't sell him if we get a 40 million bid in for him. I think that represents good business. If we can get someone like Partey, a modern midfielder in, I completely agree with Mike's point with regards to that. But what I do think is that I think there's a lot of other players that we can get rid of before him. I think that with the attitude in itself, in terms of him being sort of, a bit of an asshole on the pitch, isn't an issue. The issue is that he's not a good enough player yet to justify that. But in what I've said with regards to, what he's achieved from coming, from League Two and being in a disorganized team, admittedly, and doing quite well, you can kind of see where it gets to his head a little bit as a 21-year-old millionaire. So for me, I think that it kind of says more about the club than it does about Guendouzi. And I think that in an ideal world, you would iron these issues out and you'd have a very good player. But if Arteta feels that he can't get rid of it, then, he has to do what he has to do. But then I'd say all of our senior players have to kind of look at themselves as well, because it's their job to run that dressing room when a young person comes in with a bit of, a bit too much arrogance, maybe, or a bit too much confidence. And to put him in his place and just to let him know this is how we do things. Maybe don't strangle him. Maybe you give him a cheeky shove when the ref isn't looking, or you know what I mean? Like, just get the energy, the aggressiveness, which is a good thing in itself. Just tailor it the right way. So that's my perspective on it. Yeah.
I love that sentence of maybe don't strangle him. It's just a little bit of advice. Just maybe consider not putting your hands around his throat.
But doing something to him that people can't see.
Oh yeah, of course. There is. Yeah, I get that. So, yeah. More sneaky, less Joey Barton-esque behaviour on the pitch. We had a super chat come in whilst French was talking from Ghostwriter. So I have no idea who's actually written this. Who says Torreira and Guendouzi sales can get us 90 million. We can challenge next year because if Partey and Aurora, who no one knows how to spell these days, Kouassi will change our worlds. Kouassi is definitely off to Bayern Munich as one on a free. However, replace that with another free French guy. I don't think I've mentioned this guy on the show, but Malang Sarr. I don't think I've talked about him at all. but yeah, he's definitely someone that we should look at. And actually, it builds on that point because whilst I agree with you, French, in that there's players that we should look to sell before Guendouzi. The issue is with those players is actually trying to find a buyer for those players. Guendouzi is just so much more marketable at the moment and is so much better to get in the money. And I mean, Ghostwriter again with another super chat, much appreciated, mate, who says too many jacks of all trades and not enough specialists are in this side, which is a weird one because I actually think there's quite a lot of I think there's actually not enough specialised players in certain positions for us. And actually, jack of all trades is someone like Guendouzi who can play in sort of a centre midfield role, that can play on the defence, can move forwards, but none of those attributes are at the moment at a top level, which, as you said, French, is the reason why he doesn't have the front. He doesn't have that reputation to be able to do the things and say the things he's saying at the moment. John, on Guendouzi, there's so many issues that the fan base sort of gets divided on with him because he's a young guy. He's been here less than 2 years. I think people think he's been here like for so long, but he came in at the start of Unai Emery's tenure. I think he was one of Sven Mislintat's first sort of real signings after like the Mavropanos stuff and things like that. But he was one of the first ones. Is there an argument to say that if Arsenal do lose Guendouzi, then this whole argument that I've been putting forward about we need to invest in youth and try and develop them, does that go out the window? Is it actually sort of a negative against Arsenal if they do sell Guendouzi?
Look, it really comes down to a few things. I'm not going to speculate as to what he's like in the dressing room just because I have absolutely no idea. And I think that I'm going to assume, just for the purpose of this conversation, that that maybe that stuff's blown out of proportion, right? Just because if he's a problem in the dressing room, that's an easy decision in my opinion, right? But let's just say that maybe he's a little hot-headed. He's a young kid, but he's manageable. So so assuming that as a premise, I don't necessarily think that you have to give every youth a chance, all right? I don't know if that Guendouzi falls in that category. I think he's very talented. I think that he has a high ceiling. Whether he's ready to make that next step, I think that assessment of him being this jack of all trades where, it's not exactly great at everything, but you can definitely see some good things that he does. I think that So to answer your question, I think that you can actually hold that position that we need to invest in the youth, and at the same time hold the position that maybe certain youth aren't really ideal for us at this moment in time. And once again, whether Guendouzi is one of those is a different story. I think that his big issue, and I mentioned this before, his positional discipline is just terrible. All right. And I think that that's going to come with time. I think, yeah, obviously being a hothead and making stupid decisions like that and running around and trying to force choke people after the games, which, as funny as it is, definitely can run yourself into some trouble. And I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because at the same time, we want to see those Keown, Vieira, fiery type players again. And then when someone does something that, like a Keown probably would have done, we're like, oh, well, don't do that. So I'm a little hesitant to chastise him on that. I will say that from a tactical standpoint, he really needs to work on actually formulating himself in one specific area and making that area his own. He kind of just runs all over the place, and it hasn't really gotten too much better, which is concerning to me. So that for me, when he initially started, he had a lot of positives. I thought on the ball he's very good, and I think that there's a lot of good engine that he has pushing the game forward. But that positional discipline was always an issue for me, and it doesn't seem to be getting better yet. Obviously, it's a little bit of a weird situation given the whole break that we've had, but I'm going to be looking for that going forward. And ultimately, that'll determine whether he falls into that category of ones that we should just write off rather than keep trying to invest in.
Okay. Just something to add more on Guendouzi. Just ever since Arteta came in, I've had a feeling ever since that ruthless comment, the non-negotiables comment, and then seeing him not just say things, lots of coaches say things, don't do it. He seems to do it. And to me, I wrote about it today, that's the most impressive thing with Mikel Arteta, is he does what he says. And whether it's Pepe, who's been dropped, hasn't played in certain games, Mesut Ozil, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, there's a thread, Guendouzi, there's a thread of players who have underachieved or have allegedly had a bad attitude, who've been left out entirely of the squad or sat on the bench. And so I think that if you look at the pattern of Mikel Arteta, I would not be surprised at all that he not only wants to make the players accountable game to game, Tom, I think at the end of the season, a coach, and I coach too, so I guess got a little experience in this, is sometimes you want to make a statement to your squad. You want to make sure that your squad fully understand that I'm going to make you accountable from game to game, but at the end of the season, I'm going to reevaluate, and there's going to be some of you that will not play for this club anymore, and for the rest of you to take me seriously in what I'm saying, this is what I'm going to have in order for you to believe that you are accountable from season to season and not just game to game. So I think he'll be sold if what we're hearing is true.
Yeah, it's so key to have the right balance, not just in terms of positions and traits, but the same balance in terms of mentality in the dressing room. I mean, it's one of the things that Arteta cites about David Luiz, that whilst David Luiz might make loads of mistakes on the pitch, the actual mentality side of things in the dressing room and the winning mentality that he has and the way that he can mentor some younger players and have that sort of just that professionality in there. And I know that people will disagree on that point. And I trust me, I get so frustrated. I mean, I've got a whole rant-up video about re-signing David Luiz, but you have to be honest and say that it's the balance about having the right attitudes in the dressing room as well is really important. Tomo, you mentioned that Guendouzi only having 2 years left on his deal is also a big factor in this situation. We've heard Raul say time and time again that when a player comes towards the end of his contract, if he's not going to re-sign, then we need to sell him. So far, we've not really seen too much deliverance on that as of yet. Do you think Guendouzi could be one of the early examples that we start to see of this policy? Oh, you're muted at the moment, Tom. I think we can't hear a word you're saying. No, it's your mic, mate. I think you have to swap your headset over or something like that. Whilst we're waiting for you, French, whilst Tom's sorting out his mic, do you mind coming on there? So with 2 years left on his contract, do you think it's a really key issue that we do move someone on in that sense? Even as, like, because obviously your opinion is that you'd rather keep him.
Yeah.
But knowing that he might not re-sign and we're getting like £40 million moves, then that kind of wants to make me go. So what's your thoughts?
You got to take care of it. Like, I mean, the reasons for selling him, if it's to do with funds, that makes sense to me. If it's to do with contractual issues, because 2 years left and we don't want to get into any of these situations where there's under 2 years left anymore, that makes sense. I think there's quite a few other contracts, not coming off the top of my head, I can't quite remember, but coming up in 2 years that we got to deal with this summer. So I understand that side of it entirely. My issue is more when we talk about the attitude thing. Again, non-negotiables, I do understand that, but then it reinforces the impression I have that the attitude of all these players, the senior players, stinks generally. So again, it raises the thing of there are more pressing issues, there are bigger fish to fry in terms of people to get rid of. And another thing that comes into mind that I mentioned in the group chat, we mentioned a bunch of players who haven't played, who've missed games, like Pepe, like Ainsley Maitland-Niles. I'm personally not aware of any reports of Pepe's having attitude problems or whether it's underachieving. But then another player who's not played much at all since Arteta's come in, except for when Aubameyang came out, is Gabriel Martinelli. And so at that point, it's like, I don't know. We can't assume what goes on in the dressing room type of thing. We don't know what's going on and why players are being left out as well, with, like, say, Nicolas Pepe. I can't, there's some, yeah, I don't know. So with the Martinelli thing again, you kind of question if it is an attitude issue. Are you okay with Martinelli being left out because he might have had an issue with Arteta? That it starts to feel a little bit weird if we're gonna not put all of our young talent, if we're gonna bench our young talent because of young issues, immature issues. Anyway, yeah.
Let's do a mic check on Tomo. Can you hear us, fella? Can you hear anything, or are we in a world of limbo at the moment? That's a confused man's face right there. You might have to restart your computer, mate, just to see if we can get your microphone back. I kind of want to move on the Guendouzi chat to the next sort of topic, because I feel like we could go on about this for so long. I want to bring up, John, Bukayo Saka, because in these 3 games, for a club that is in such disarray at the moment, there is this real young shining light of a player coming through and really sort of showing what he's about. And a key thing and a key issue that Arsenal are having to deal with right now is the fact that he's going to be out of contract soon and they need to tie him down. Arteta's coming out and saying that he's hopeful and he's positive that something's going to be sorted very soon. Mm-hmm. If Arteta gets this done, where does sort of the credit fall? Because we can talk for ages about how amazing Saka is as a young player, but I actually kind of want to praise Arteta in this sense, because to re-sign a player of his talent who could go off and earn a fair bit of money at another big club in this league or abroad, there's a lot of credit have to fall on Arteta's shoes for really convincing this player to re-sign.
So first, it wasn't just the last couple games. Since the beginning, I would say, of the season, he has been one of the, if not, in my opinion, the shining kind of players. Definitely top 3 shining players that we've had in an overall, let's say, gray season that we've had, to put it lightly. So it's extremely important when we're talking about youth players that are ones that we do need to invest in. Saka doesn't fall into that middle ground category that maybe Guendouzi does. He's absolutely a player that we need to be keeping track of and keeping on the books, right? This is a player with a huge future, super talented, looks like he's able to just jump right in, fearless. And it's not like one of those things where, oh, well, maybe, he has some flashes of good. I mean, he's consistently good. So this and versatile appears as well. So definitely a player we want to sign. As to Arteta's involvement in that and what his kind of role was, it's interesting. At first, it was definitely like, I'm very confident we're going to sign this player, we're going to get the deal done. And then the most recent comments were like, well, the ball's in his court. It wasn't as definitive and optimistic. It was more like well, hopefully this gets done, which was a little concerning to me, because I definitely think Saka is a player that we need to hang on to. if we can get it over the line, I think Arteta absolutely is going to be a big part of that. Ultimately, it comes down to dollars and cents, unfortunately, in my opinion, as with this is a business nowadays. It's not, he grew up around Arsenal, and yes, he likes all the other players, I'm sure, and all that fun stuff. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make financial sense. And is this a place I could see myself growing as a competitor? And I think that with the latter aspect of that, if he does sign, Arteta has, in my opinion, convinced him that that's the case. He can grow as a footballer, that they buy into this plan that he has. Whether those plans actually work, I mean, how many times have we seen, oh, there's a plan? It was with Wenger, he had a plan. With Emery, there was a plan. Now there's this. So whether that plan actually works is a topic for another discussion. But if he signs, I think to answer your question, yes, I think a big portion of that needs to be attributed to Arteta. And then, to whatever, I guess, backroom deals that are being made with respect to contracts and actually getting paid for what you're worth and what you could be worth. So I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag there, but absolutely, definitely on Arteta for a significant portion of it.
Yeah, I totally agree in terms of like a huge amount of credit would have to go to Arteta if he signs. I've got to be honest, my stance right now is I don't really think he is going to sign.
Neither.
I just think the amount of time it's been dragged out sort of thing and the position that we're in, I feel like he's just weighing up his options and seeing what's happening. And this kind of ties back into what I was saying earlier with regards to objectives for the season. I mean, do you feel like maybe showing the ambition and the potential to get into the top six would make a young player like Saka more likely to sign, not based off necessarily positioning but just actually seeing that we're doing something, that we're going in, there is, something happening, because I mean, he's got he's going to have a year left. So I don't know. I feel like the decision has to be made by summer, and the amount of time it's dragged on, I feel like something has to happen to make him want to do it. I feel like if it just peters off and we lose here and we win there, and it's I just don't know what happened.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. To answer your question, I think that with a young player like that, as much, maybe not like I think the biggest thing for him right now is just being able to play, which is one reason why I think not only is he playing well, but one reason why I think Arteta has been using him so much over someone like maybe Martinelli is that we got to sign Saka, in my opinion, from his ties with this club, from the talent that he has, from his versatility. I think Martinelli's an excellent player, but in my opinion, we're prioritizing someone like Saka, and he's playing well, which is one reason why he's getting picked. I also think there's an aspect of trying to play him into signing a contract. And basically, I don't think we could have done anything more with Saka right now, and Arteta couldn't have done anything more with Saka right now to show him, if you sign, you're playing for Arsenal. It's clear that that's what's going to happen. So
do you guys think that he's trying to mold him into a David Silva type player and show him that he will build the team around his ability?
Maybe. And, if that's the case, that would be an interesting prospect that hasn't even really occurred to me. But whether or not that's the case, it's at least certain that he's playing him a lot and he sees him as an important player for him going forward. So, I'm not obviously a professional footballer, but if I were and I were young, I would think that would be a very enticing thing for me. So I hope it works and I hope he signs, because I think he's an incredible talent.
Just on the Martinelli thing really quickly, I understand your point in terms of Saka playing ahead of him, but with 5 substitutes and needing a goal and him being the second highest goal scorer, it still doesn't explain why he hasn't seen any game time.
For sure.
Even before the injury recently.
What about with Martinelli? What about if he is only 18 years old, so physically maybe he's not quite there, and that time off he could have come back like slightly out of shape. So not saying he put on a Ronaldo R9 belly, but he may not have been, attuned to like the level of some of the other guys, and so he is a kid. I think we almost put too much expectation on him.
Saka's 18 though.
There's a lot of kids in the team. We've got the most scorers under 20 in the Premier League. So I get your point, but then there was also, like, as soon as Aubameyang came back, I'm pretty sure Martinelli got dropped even before the break. So I don't know. I just have some questions as to where Arteta sees his place in the team, and I'm just wondering. Yeah, it doesn't quite make sense to me.
Just in response to Tomo's thought, I thought that was a really smart thought there with the David Silva comment, because that's where Arteta's come from. He's come from City. He's seen a guy playing for City for about 10 years, hugely successful, and Saka has a very, very similar skill set. Of course, David Silva used to glide past people and have that level of quickness when he was younger as well. The second point I was going to make on Saka is, if this thing goes wrong, I sure hope that Saka's agent isn't the hub of this, because to me, he's an Arsenal boy. He's getting to play every minute of every single game for Arsenal. He's not going to get that necessarily if he goes to Liverpool, which is one of the clubs that's been linked with him. And you know what? If his agent, if it's a money thing, as John said, I get that. But if he's been offered like 10 times his salary, which is like 30 to 40,000 a week, okay, for me, I would advise him, take it, because you're going to play at Arsenal. And you know what? In 6 months' time, on your trajectory that you are currently on, you could go after 80, 90, 100,000 if you just wait for 6 months, because that boy is improving so rapidly. Then I don't think that his contract right now should matter to him a whole lot, because that contract's going to get big and big fast if he just sits and waits and just plays.
I think I think he's a really humble boy. I think he's really intelligent. I think they're probably looking footballistically where Arsenal are going before they make their decision. I personally don't think it's down to money, or I probably optimistically hope it's not about money. He's a phenomenal player. And I think Arteta likes these boys, because he can mold them. Like I said, I really see parallels between him and Silva. The same way that, I see parallels with, Eddie Nketiah and maybe, Aguero. And you look at, how much work and time and effort Arteta's putting into these guys. These guys are hungry, they're willing, they're athletic, they've got ability to grow. And I think Arteta wants players like that, guys who are technical ability and hard work, naturally, a good work ethic. And he can mold these guys. And I think Arteta needs players he could mold. And I think that's why they're key to his plans. I think that's why he's pushing them and playing them. And I really am super happy for Saka. Like I said, I hope he signs. I'm absolutely buzzing for Eddie. I mean, after what happened to him on loan, to come back and for starting playing games in the Premiership at his age, I mean, I'm really excited about these boys. And hopefully Arteta can mold them and make them better players. And, they've done it at City, and I'm hoping they can do it at Arsenal.
I think that there's so much potential what we've got within this young group. I said I've always maintained one of the biggest issues we've got is just in the squad, we've got such a gap between the core of young players and then our older players. There just isn't enough in between in terms of age profiles in this squad. Besides, you look at maybe Pepe and Torreira. They're sort of the only real two examples that we've got of those players, Bellerin, that are in that bracket. And we need to fulfil that a little bit more, because whilst it's great to have these young players coming through, Arteta hit the nail on the head when he talked about in the press conference. He said that these youngsters are playing more than they should be at this age. And whilst, it's great that they're playing at this level, it's really important that you bed players in. Otherwise, you do get burnt out. I mean, I think we've seen that with Bellerin, for instance, as an example. He played so much football at such a young age for us consistently across season. And we're starting to see sort of a decline in his quality. And that could be down to the amount of intense games that we've seen him play, but also you've got to factor in that he had a massive injury that definitely had an impact on his season as well. There's so much to consider. This squad is such a big challenge for Arteta to do. You'd look at Pep Guardiola, you'd look at the top managers in Klopp. Even if these guys were in charge of Arsenal right now, I think they would have big struggles, because the squad is so difficult. And not only that, but we've got problems way further up than just the squad and the coach that are addressed day in, day out. As we sort of round down to the final 10, 15 minutes of the show, I want to look ahead to Sheffield United, because the FA Cup has suddenly become so much more in focus for us this season with how the league is going. French, when you look at the FA Cup now, it gets sort of, I don't want to use the word degraded, but it almost feels like it does. And I don't know if that's because Arsenal have won it more than any other club. It might be. People don't seem to like competitions that we've won more than other people. But when you look at the FA Cup for Arsenal this season, if we were to win it, do you think that would be a greater achievement and a more important achievement than the previous ones at the end of the Arsene Wenger era?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's completely different. I mean, it's the start of a new era, isn't it? It's the start of a rebuild. And if you're talking about the end of an era, it's like, what can sort of redeem this? What can sign this off? And one of the FA Cups would have been nice. I can't remember which one it was exactly, but there was one FA Cup, I think the second one, where you were like, yeah, nice.
2015.
Good time. Yeah, or even maybe the third one. Any one of those FA Cups would have been a decent moment to sign off, but it still wasn't something that you would have said, yeah, sweet, right, let's go again sort of thing. Whereas now, we're looking at something that I feel like a FA Cup would be something that would be really helpful in getting someone like Saka to sign a new contract, for example. And Aubameyang wouldn't make a difference, I don't imagine. But so a young player, to show him that there's something that, just that feeling of winning silverware and being a winner and being a champion in some way is a huge boost to the start of a rebuild and to these young players. So I think it's a completely different thing. It's going to be, the objective is tricky, but I think obviously the reason it's come down is because we don't really get any money from it. But in terms of morale, in terms of what it would be for the squad and the young players particularly, I think it will be fantastic.
John, what do you make of Sheffield United at the moment? Because they were on fire, it's fair to say, at the start of the season. They're in an amazing position in the league, but things are starting to, I don't use the word unravel, but they've had some struggles. Manchester United obviously beat them 3-0. John Egan got sent off in another one of their games, and that was a big loss for them. I believe they've had to bring in Robinson at the back as well to replace one of their other players. I can't remember who it is off the top of my head. After he got suspended, but there's someone came in right at the start. I can't remember. It might have been Basham that wasn't in the lineup, but I don't know. I can't remember. Someone in the chat will probably tell me. But we can't underestimate this side because they've done so well. How do you sort of see this one playing out?
Well, okay, so here's the thing. That kind of a statement does not actually make me feel better. It makes me even more concerned, just because we have any Arsenal fan knows that we have this almost supernatural ability to have a team that's not doing well and struggling a little bit, or a player that's not doing well or struggling a little bit, and then they come and they play us, and it's like, oh, well, here we go. Now we're back.
We haven't won a game all 2020.
Yeah, I mean that. So when I hear, oh, they've been struggling a bit, I'm going, great, we're losing this. But that's just like conditioning and kind of being beat down by the fact that seems to happen more often than not. I don't know what kind of metaphysical vendetta the universe has against Arsenal in that regard, but there's something going on there. All jokes aside, though, I think that they do have a lot of talent on that team, and they're a very well put together and well drilled unit. I think that it's a little difficult for them to kind of balance that out with the break. I think that break is a big asterisk on most teams right now. It's going to be hard to see how teams bounce back. Obviously, in football, momentum is so important, and they had a lot of that in the beginning of the season. Whether that got broken up and they're unable to recover is going to be a kind of a test for them. So I think this game for them is just as important as it is for us, maybe even more so, just because I think a lot of us have kind of already written this season off. But for them, they really want to have that momentum going throughout the season. And I think a lot of it has to do with making sure that their players maybe can be offloaded and sold and increase the value of their squad. A lot of it has to do with just the fact that they want to go in and do as best as they can. But the point is, I think that they're going to come out and play us well. And I'd like to put all the jokes aside, but the reality is teams do seem to play well against us, especially when they've been in a slump. So, not a little concerned.
Tomo, I think we can partly glean maybe elements of Arteta's lineup, but there is an interesting one that's coming up, and that's the possible inclusion of Cedric. If you looked at the most recent sort of team news, the words were that he was vying to be available for this game. Bellerin's played 3 of the last. He's played a lot of games this season. He's played 90 minutes in the last 3 games since the restart. Do you think if Cedric is fit, this is the game to bring him in, or is it too high pressure? And what do you actually make of the Cedric situation?
I think Cedric has to come in. I think Bellerin needs a break. I do like him because he is Arsenal through and through, so I don't want to throw him under the bus. But he has been poor. And I think Cedric, look at Arsenal and the lows. I don't know if we've ever really had a loan work out in the last few years. I'm hoping Cedric is different. Bellerin is just, I mean, the last game, I don't know what his pass completion stats were like, in the first half, but I mean, that's probably one of the poorest I've ever seen. I mean, and I do like the guy because, again, he is Arsenal through and through, and I want him to do well. But we need competition in that position, and I do think, having, Kearney come into the left back position, I think we can see that he's going to be world class. I think he's got it, and he's got what it takes to make that position his own and grow. And we need something on the right. So hopefully Suarez can perform. He had a bit of an up and down season at Southampton before he came through. I mean, signed to a long-term contract. So again, I don't want to throw a player under the bus before he's even started. But let's hope he can come in and do a job. I'm not sure if he'll play the whole game. It's clear Ainsley doesn't want to play right back, so we do need to mix it up. So I think this will be a perfect game for him to start. Hopefully he doesn't get injured. Hopefully he can see out the game, and hopefully he can push Bellerin to rediscover some form.
I think it's going to be really. I mean, I don't think he'll start. I actually think that Ainsley Maitland-Niles will probably start because I don't think he's going to be fit to come straight into the starting lineup. I hope he is. Because I'd like to see Cedric play, and I agree with you on Mainsley's sort of reluctance to play at right back. But I feel like Bellerin needs to be rested no matter what, even if it's Socrates that comes in for the guy, which has been trialled and tested. I think that he just needs to be taken out of the firing line a little bit. Mike, to sort of round off the final points on the Sheffield United game, the most interesting areas of the pitch is definitely in the striking position, and Ketty obviously scoring against Southampton. Lacazette just has not been hitting form whatsoever. But would you be putting the Frenchman in against Sheffield United, or do you maintain your faith in the youngster?
Well, that's a tough one. I think it's going to be fatigue-based decision as well. There's a lot of the squad that might have to be rotated because of the fatigue issue. Probably the whole back four. There's an argument for all of those guys. The Nketiah situation, I think that he probably will play. Arteta's favoured him in all of the games that is probably all of them over Lacazette. And I think that he's won because he has been substituted, so he's got less time in his legs. I think there's a good chance that he will be favoured. There's also an argument, I think, for Aubameyang at centre forward. So bear with me, but Aubameyang's played every minute of the last three, but he's had to run a whole lot further than Eddie's had to run. So if you wanted to keep your goals in the team, which you sort of have to, because not many players score for Arsenal, is you play Aubameyang at centre forward. So that will put Eddie on the bench and keep your best goal scorer in the team. So I'm wondering about that one, Tom.
I think the striking position is the most contentious, arguably, in the side at the moment, along with obviously the right back situation as well. Centre back kind of picks itself because of lack of numbers. Centre midfield as well. Xhaka has to play for us to seemingly get any result at the moment, and that probably goes understated. I tweeted it out saying that we're just simply a different side when Xhaka plays and when he doesn't. And if we've got any hope of getting a result, I feel that he has to be in the lineup. In the chat box, we're seeing a couple of things about Mesut Ozil. Adam Stroud in the chat box says that he thinks that we can see Mesut Ozil coming in. Mike Hernandez says if we don't see Ozil in this game, it's safe to say that his probably time's gone and he's going to be leaving. So it's a really, really weird situation, the Ozil. Well, I didn't really want to talk about it today, and I'm going to stick by that because I think it gets sort of overdone. I put him in the thumbnail, but just mainly because I wanted to put Mesut Poppins. That's just amazing. The picture of him with his umbrella was unbelievable, and I had to put it in the title for the lineup. To round off today's show, to round off your hour of TGT, I'm going to go around the guys and get their scoreline predictions for the game. So, French mate, starting with you, what are you going to go with for the game?
Probably 1-1 penalties, and we'll win.
Oh, it's positive. I mean, it's the least positivity I think I've ever heard. But it's positive. John?
You know what? I'm going to go 3-1 Arsenal.
Okay.
I think we're gonna be surprised. I think some of these youngsters are going to score. It's going to be a fun time. All right.
Have you watched us before?
Look, I'm will. If the universe can play jokes, I can will something. So hopefully, let's see. It's
good stuff. In the chat box, please be putting your predictions for the game. We're going to highlight some of them before we wrap up. Tomo, what are you going for?
Arsenal playing with the pressure off, a bit of rotation. No one expects anything from us, so we obviously will win. So 2-1 Arsenal.
Okay, awesome. And last but by no means least, Mike, what are you going to pick?
Well, this goes to penalty kicks if it's a draw. Am I correct?
Yep, it will.
Well,
because they've got rid of replays.
If I hear you right, if it goes, if FA Cup games go to penalty kicks, I'm being forgetful. I think they do go. I think Martinez will be the hero, and Arsenal will win the penalties.
So I was almost sure that you were going to be like, they go to penalties, right? And you were going, and then after yes, you were going to go, oh, okay. In that case, we're going to lose. One. I was just waiting for it. I was waiting for it. I'm glad it didn't go there.
I mean, as negative could be as the opposite to French there in the different predictions of penalty shootouts. That's going to round us off for today. Let's just shout through some of your predictions. I'm loving the positivity at the moment. Adam Stroud says 1-0 Arsenal. Goose 1066 says 6-5 to the Arsenal. I mean, wow, that would be a hell of a game for sure. MK says 1-0 to the Arsenal. Mike Hernandez, who became a member this week. Thank you so much, Mike, for becoming a member with us. You can join Mike and the rest of our members by clicking the join button on the channel. Core says 2-0 to the Arsenal. Brian Robles or Robles, please correct me. Brian in the chat says 2-0. Arsenal Granny says 2-1 to the Arsenal. I'm loving this positivity. French, you need to learn some from these. You need to learn some positivity.
I said we'd win.
Just.
Yeah, but one goal. But I agree with
the most painful way. I'm surprised you didn't go 0-0 penalties and we win. That was as close to a loss as feasibly possible.
We'll bottle it in the last 5 minutes of extra time or something, won't we? So.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. But yeah, I'm going to go for 1-0 Coquelin to score. No, I think I'm going to go. I'm going to go 1-0 and Cedric to score the winner. How sick would that be?
That was a throwback.
It was. I mean, if Cedric comes on and scores the winner, I mean, he'll be a forever hero. Well, forever, but, for a couple of weeks until he does something the following week and is hated universally by all Arsenal fans. But I'm looking for a really positive victory. I'm loving that you guys in the chat are being positive. Ghostwriter's jumped in to say 4-0 to the Arsenal, which would be amazing. I'm going to go for a very, very cagey 1-0 win. I don't care who scores, just as long as we win. But it's been a real pleasure tonight. A really nice flowing discussion. French, do you want to plug anything, mate? Shout anything out your Twitter?
No, I'm all right. Yeah. Check me out next time I'm on here.
He doesn't care. He just does. He's just carefree. I'm loving this. I'm loving it. John, can we? I ask you this every time. Can we see the Arsenal Miami podcast back anytime soon?
I'll plead the fifth.
Okay.
I think so. At this point, I was more confident before. I want to, and it's so easy now with like Zoom. You could like record audio and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you've had the time. I mean, there's been a lockdown.
I know. I used to have to like record it on like Skype, and it was such a pain in the butt, and I had to like go on GarageBand and like edit it. So I don't know.
You get Liam Edwards on, you'll be fine. So it'll be all good. Yeah. But thank you, John. I really appreciate you taking the time out even to come on. Tomo, we've had a couple of connectivity issues, but I think you're there and you're back in full flow. Is there anything that you'd like to plug before you go?
If Saka doesn't sign in the next couple of weeks, we need to start an online petition, and maybe we all do like a 20-second, appreciation,
we can do Saka
or something, and then we put it all together, and you send it to Saka to make sure he's signed.
I don't think it'll work, but we can try. There's one thing Arsenal players are good at, is ignoring the fan base, it's fair to say. And Mike, to round us off, mate, talk to us about your most recent article. What have you been writing about?
Well, yeah, I write for Gunners Town and do the positives, needs and hopes column after every single Arsenal game. So go check that out. I had one today that's out there. which was an interesting slant, I suppose. I write transfer blogs for Le Grove as well, and do quizzes, Who Am I quizzes for the Mr. Arsenal podcast. So different things going on there.
Awesome. Loads of stuff to get your teeth sunk into. There will be a link to Mike's latest article, as I said, and of course the Drew's article as well. Speaking of which, we're going to have an exciting tactical breakdown podcast probably on Monday with a real life football scout. So that's going to be quite interesting. Fingers crossed that all comes together. So we'll be able to ask some questions about why Arsenal's scouting system isn't very good at the moment. We'll be able to ask about what actually goes on in the world of football scouting. It's been a real pleasure. Make sure you follow us all on Twitter. You can find all of the guys' links in the description. And of course, when I tweet it out from @theGoonerTalkTV. Tomorrow's show is going to be the preview for the Sheffield United game, followed by, of course, the Raw Reaction show straight after the game. So to make sure that you tune in for that, please subscribe to the channel and turn those notifications on, and drop a like on today's video if we have filled your evening with delight. I hope we have, other than French's negativity, but you know who predicted a win, so growth from the man there. We'll see you again very, very soon, and of course, as always, up the Arsenal.